Hallo en welkom bij deze sessie gegeven door Matt Wats, CTO EMEA van NetApp. Hij gaat jullie meenemen in de mogelijke datastrategieën in de complexe wereld van hybrid cloud. Nou, vergeet vooral niet om vragen te stellen in de chat en alvast veel plezier naar het kijken van deze sessie.
Hi, I'm Matt Wats from NetApp, and great that I could join you today. You never know how many people are on these calls, but I'm going to try and do this with my usual level of enthusiasm. Great to be here. And I wanted to start off with something that with a bit of a quote rather than getting straight into my slide deck. And there's somebody who's always kind of fascinated me was a gentleman called Douglas Adams, who many of you will have heard of, certainly will remember. Douglas Adams was famous, as most of you know, for writing The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And when we think about IT and the pace of change, it's very easy to think that maybe his famous quote is "Don't panic," which I think is sometimes appropriate as well. But one of the things that he said that, because he talked a lot, as he was a bit of a philosopher as much as a writer. And one of the things that he said that really stuck with me was he said, every piece of technology that exists in the world when you're born is normal. And you think about that, where we are today. We've got the iPhone 12 about to launch, and children being born into this world today will not know a world without the cloud, without iPhones, without all of this incredible technology. But he then goes on to say, every piece of technology that comes along before you're 35 is an opportunity, and potentially you can build your career around it. But he then goes on to say, every piece of technology that comes along after you're 35 will bring about the end of the world and must be completely rejected. And I have that in my mind because there are so many times when I see something new, whether it's TikTok or whatever it might be. And as I get a little older in IT, it becomes increasingly easy to look at something like that and just dismiss it and just say, oh, what's the point? And I think of that statement, I think of what Douglas Adams said, because it reminds me that just because something doesn't have value to me doesn't mean that it doesn't have value to someone. And I think with this incredible pace of change that we're seeing, with new applications, with new technologies, with new kind of social platforms, it's so incumbent on us as IT professionals, as technology professionals, to be comfortable that sometimes we have to embrace these things. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about kind of where we see the industry going, what we think some of the trends are that are going to affect things going forward, and then talk a little bit about how NetApp has evolved over this sort of period of time and has become the company that we are today. I'm going to talk about our strategy and our vision, and more importantly, the rise of something that we call data fabrics. And data fabric is not a NetApp thing. This is something that's becoming more of a concept, an idea within the industry to help companies deal with this kind of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, hybrid multi-cloud, because we love to smash these terms together and create new ones. But I want to show you why I think it's of such significance. So during the session today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the trends in the industry, some of the things that we think about, some of the things that I'm sure are on a lot of the minds of people listening to this. I'm going to talk about the sort of evolution of IT, how things have changed, and how they'll continue to change going forward. And then at the end, I'll tie that back together as to why I think data fabric as an idea, as a strategy, is something that I think could be really beneficial to organizations. So when I look back, and by the way, just before I get into this, for those of you who are listening to this, if you have any questions, please throw the questions up on chat. And I'll pause every so often. If there's questions there, I'll take them and then we can move on with the rest of the session. So the way I think about this is that there have effectively been three waves of technology. In the term that means something to me in IT, which goes back to sort of the 2000s. The first wave was very much infrastructure focused. It was helping companies consolidate, helping companies standardize, simplify, bring efficiencies to it. And NetApp in that first wave, we were very much known as the NAS company, the storage company, and the filer company. If you've known NetApp for long enough, And that wave doesn't go away. That wave of where people are looking at modernizing on-premises technology, that will continue. It's just that the focus changes as we see new waves start to grow. The second wave, the one that I think fundamentally changed the IT landscape, probably more than anything else that we've seen, was from a vendor point of view, Flash, that certainly affected us, but I think it was more around virtualization. Virtualization fundamentally changed the IT landscape for both us and also for companies like yourselves. And that wave will continue as companies look to invest in and continue to build, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, that sort of private cloud opportunities. But then there's the third wave. And you can argue as to when this started and kind of where we are within it, but it's definitely a wave that's increasingly people are looking at. And this is, like I said, it's everything to do with cloud. How do we start to augment our capabilities with the cloud? How do we start to consume capabilities from the cloud? It's cloud, cloud, cloud. And that brings a whole new set of challenges, but I think more importantly, an exciting new set of opportunities for us all. And as a person, as a technologist in this industry, I've constantly tried to evolve through these waves, evolve my own skills. And as NetApp, we've consistently tried to evolve our technologies and our portfolio as we go through them as well. And one of the things that's interesting when you start thinking about these three different waves is that data has become increasingly important. We go back to that first wave. Data was effectively what got created by the application or by the users. And our focus as technology vendors was very much to focus on technology. Is ours faster, better, cheaper, more widgets, more sprockets? How was our infrastructure better than other people's? And I think NetApp did a good job of connecting that to, showing that storage can add value to data, showing that storage or putting the right storage in place can help protect it, help secure it, help mobilize it, help it be more efficient. But I think the big change for me as we went into the second wave was as virtualization happened, a whole bunch of different things happened with technology. Infrastructure discussions became less. We started to see the drive towards a more commoditization of hardware. We saw a massive increase in the number of applications that people were putting into these virtual environments. But the biggest change that I saw was the definition of data changed. Data was no longer just what got created by a user or an application. It is the application. It is the application, the operating system, the virtual machine, and the data being created. That was good for NetApp. And what was interesting was in that wave, actually a lot of companies, a lot of analysts, a lot of people said this will be the end of infrastructure companies, and they were wrong. Because fundamentally, these storage services, these data services that we'd been delivering to applications and data previously, suddenly we were able to deliver these into entire virtual environments. And what's more, people had to virtualize. If you wanted to benefit from what virtualization could do, they had to have shared storage. So our value was suddenly then raised because we were starting to add value into virtual environments. In the next phase, where are we going? I think it's fair to say that if I reflect on the conversations I have with customers on a day-to-day basis or companies on a day-to-day basis, very much we get focused and we start with data. It is, what do we have? What do we need? What have we got? Where is it? Is it compliant? Is it, so it very much starts with a kind of a data-focused discussion. Then we typically move around to applications. We're spinning through applications really rapidly. A few years ago, everybody was moving to Hadoop. Roll forward to today, everybody's now moving on. And they're now looking at R and Spark and Kafka and the whole next generation of applications to give us better, more real-time insights into data. And the infrastructure discussion becomes less as we see more of a kind of a continuing commoditization of hardware and as we see the rise of the cloud. In the cloud, you don't care about the infrastructure. So these are the kind of shifts that we're seeing, which I think is particularly of interest to me. So if we look at what are the trends that kind of sit behind this? So we know that the data is evolving in types, in size, in the level of importance. But then there's three kind of pillars that I'm interested in, that I look at behind this. The first one is application architectures are changing. As we move from the kind of the first platform to the second platform, and now increasingly to the third platform, where we're really starting to focus on microservices, containers, and Kubernetes seems to be the one that's the sort of the orchestration layer that's moving out in front. The way we deploy continues to evolve as we start to think more about that kind of private cloud, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and then increasingly software as a service. Because in the future, it will become more and more difficult for you to buy software because the companies providing it won't want to sell it to you. They want to sell you a subscription. So that's something, again, as we think about what infrastructure is going to look like, the ways that we want that to deliver services is going to change dramatically. And then there's technology. And I'm a geek. I came into IT in the kind of the early part, or the late part of the 90s, early part of the 2000s. And I came in because I love tech. And I'll pick on one thing just to show the pace of change that we're seeing. Today, the largest solid state drive that we ship as an organization is a 30 terabyte solid state disk. Technically, it's not a 30. It's actually a 30.6 terabyte solid state drive. But we don't mention the 0.6 because it's a waste of words. If I take you back 4, maybe 5 years ago, the largest one you could buy was a 400 gigabyte drive. That is smaller than the rounding error I don't even mention on the one we ship today. We have qualified the 61.2. We're not shipping it because it is frankly eye-wateringly expensive. Next year, we will get the 120, and within the next 3 years, we will get a quarter of a petabyte on something the size of your mobile phone. That's the pace of change, and that's just from a kind of a storage media perspective. We're seeing that across all aspects of IT. That's going to force us to think differently. It'll force us, I think, to think differently from two perspectives. The one, how do we procure? If we're procuring technology and writing down over 3 to 5 years, at this pace of change, after 2 years, your technology is old. After 3 years, it's out of date. And in years 4 or 5, it's probably a liability to you. So we'll have to think differently in this massive accelerated pace of change as to how we procure technology. And I think the second thing it will do is drive people to the cloud. The easiest way not to worry about technology, not to worry about trying to keep up, is to let somebody else worry about it. So we know these kind of trends are the sort of the mega trends that are really starting to affect the way that companies, the way that IT think about how they're going to operate for the future. But what's the bigger things that are happening? Because these are all just technologies and delivery models and everything else. So like I said, we're seeing a technical acceleration. That's new technologies, new applications, hybrid deployments. So we have to be ready for that. And the cloud, I think, gives us a really good way of bringing new applications online, of using new applications against our data to achieve new things. But we're seeing also, if we think about our customers, because that's the reality of it, all of this is just architectures and technology that underpins capabilities our customers want. There is an acceleration of social change. The way that individuals want to interact with organizations, the way that we want to be able to deal with organizations has fundamentally changed. If I get bad service from someone, I don't pick up the phone, I don't send them an email, I tweet. Because I know there will be people watching that Twitter account and it's very public and they will respond. So there's that shift in the way people want to do things. I make decisions as to who I bank with based on who has the best mobile banking application. So those things which are fundamentally underpinned by technology are the things that can set organizations apart. And then I think that the last one, which really is fascinating to me, it's kind of frightening and also fascinating, is there is an acceleration in the pace of life. We are becoming increasingly impatient. And if you think that we're bad, if you're old enough to have children, look at your children, because they are even worse. They want a simple engagement. They want decisions made instantly. They want that digital experience. And we look at this and we think, well, how quickly is this happening? And let me give you an example. My nephew is 13 years old, lives in Scotland. I live in the southwest of the UK. And so I don't get to see him that often, probably every 6 months. About 6 months ago, he came down to visit us and he walked through the front door of my house, and I remember saying, he's also called Matthew. I remember saying, "Oh, hi Matthew, how are you? Nice to..." And I was thinking he would say, "Nice to see you, Uncle Matt. It's been a while, Uncle Matt." No, the first words out of his mouth were, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" So I said to him, "Well, look, it's kind of complicated. So give me your email address and I'll email it to you." And I didn't expect the next words out of his mouth, which were, "What's email?" That's a 13-year-old boy who has no idea what email is and has no email account. And that's our future customer. That's the generation that we're preparing all of our businesses to engage with. These are the people that are going to be our customers of the future. And that's quite shocking. It shocked me for two reasons. The first one is I need to know how to communicate with that person. I need to know, as an organization, how do I connect to him? How do I appeal to him? How do I engage him in the way that he's used to? The second thing, which is something we all have to think about as technology companies, is how do you think he will feel when he sees you as an IT leading organization, a technological organization, and he comes to work for you on his first day at work and you give him his email address? Do you think that paints you as an advanced, technological, appealing company to that kind of generation? So there's a couple of different things we really, really have to think about going forward. Some affect the way we engage with new consumers, new generations. Some are how we even appeal to them to bring them to our companies, to bring the necessary skills that we need for the future. So with all of that as a kind of a background, I thought we'd talk a little bit about how's IT evolving then? Well, I wanted to just put this up as a bit of a sort of a sanity check, because there's probably 2 or 3 topics that come up in every IT vendor discussion or IT technology discussion at the moment, and it's probably Kubernetes and cloud. And because we talk about it so much, you get that sense of that's what everybody is doing. That's the big thing. It is, but it's just part of the third wave. And it doesn't mean that the other 2 waves go away. So I wanted to put this up, which was something from IDC from last June, as to what do they think the technology landscape within IT is going to look like kind of in 2 years' time, and what's that sort of ideal state. And it kind of shows that wave 1, which is non-cloud, is still 29% of what people will be investing in. Private cloud, we think will increase, but not dramatically. It's only to about 40% as companies start to sort of modernize some of the legacy platforms onto a private cloud. And then public cloud. The difference between where we were in June last year was 26%, moving to about 32%. So I think it's important as we kind of look at what IT looks like within our organizations, not to get too kind of it's cloud for everything, or to be led into believing that the cloud is the ultimate destination for everything, because I think the reality is that's not how this is going to play out. So how will it play out? Well, you'll continue to invest in on-premises technology, like we just talked about, wave 1. And some of that won't necessarily be on-premises. Some of that will be that you take some of those technologies, those applications, and give them to an outsourcer or a service provider, or a kind of a hosting company to manage for you. We're also going to see this growth in renting software as a service. More and more of these new software companies, that's how they want to deliver their capabilities to you. So that will become a big part of what your futures look like. There will be a shift between private and public cloud. In the public sector, we very much saw what I call the cloud misfire, which was, going back a couple of years ago, I would ask people, what's your cloud strategy? And they would say, cloud first. You go, well, technically, that's not a strategy. What that is a mandate. So what's your strategy to go cloud first? And they would say, Amazon. Again, I don't want to be picky, but what you've got there is a destination. What is your cloud strategy to enable you to go cloud first with Amazon as the destination? And at that point, it was all a bit vague. Now, the problem was these mandates drifted down from senior leadership in organizations, and IT did what they thought was right, which was just, what's the easiest thing we can get rid of to the cloud, and just moved stuff without thinking about what's the value. And what happened was a lot of these workloads went into the cloud. People found out they cost a lot more money. They didn't offer that much more benefit, and now they started to come back. But we've seen because of that a maturity. Cloud first, when I talk to people now, is no longer a mandate, it's a question. Should we go cloud first? Could we go cloud first? What would be the benefit of going cloud first? So we'll see a shift backwards and forwards between private and public. Growth in internal private clouds, as people start to try and create those more kind of cloud-like experiences on premises, where you can take applications, those sort of first wave applications, onto more of a private cloud infrastructure. That will of course happen. And then obviously a huge growth in microservices-based infrastructure, containers, Kubernetes. And what's interesting about that is we've been through the first wave, which was companies looking at stateless applications for containers, really using them as a broker to a back-end service. So if you think about it, when you ask Alexa to do something, what actually happens is a tiny little microserver comes online inside Amazon's data center. It connects you to the back-end Alexa system. It provides you with a response, and then it dies. A tiny little server that's just for you comes to life to perform a purpose and dies off. And they do thousands of these, hundreds of thousands of these every single day, every single week. You're not Amazon, but that's kind of where people have been looking at these capabilities right now. Going forward, what we start to see is that people will start to look at Kubernetes for stateful applications. Why can't I run MongoDB inside Kubernetes? Why can't I run R or Spark or Kafka or Jenkins? So we're starting to see now people actually looking at Kubernetes as the next generation of kind of virtualization for the cloud in a more flexible, more open kind of framework. And then the last part is you need to get to grips with what this looks like. The minute you open the door for people to start using the cloud, it's a double-edged sword. It's the ultimate in agility and flexibility. But on the other side of it, you're giving people access to a limitless pool of compute and storage resources. And how do you know people make good decisions? How do you know if they're tidying up after themselves? How do you know if they're shutting things down? You don't. So as you start to build this model, whether you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 of these things, having visibility, having insights, having ways to make sure you're optimizing is going to be absolutely key for you. So I was talking about this with somebody quite a while ago, and I was talking through the first wave, the second wave, and the third wave, and I could see that they weren't really from IT, so they weren't really kind of connecting what the hell I was talking about, quite frankly. And I said, I borrowed an analogy from somebody, but I've extended it slightly. And it kind of goes like this. When I think about the first wave, the kind of the core technologies, the core applications that people are running, when I was an IT administrator, I had 2 Oracle systems that were core to my business. They were called Asterisk and Obelisk. They were servers in my data center that I'd given names to. I gave them a data center and a rack to live in. I fed them with electricity. I cooled them with air conditioning. And if they got sick, I would do my best to make them better. They were like my pets. As we kind of went into the second wave and we started to think about virtualization, suddenly we didn't have a few pets that we gave names to. Suddenly we had hundreds of virtual machines running applications. They're all important, but we don't give them individual names. We don't treat them the way that we do our pets. We think of them more like cattle. They are all important. And we want to manage the herd. And if one of the herd gets sick, you do your best to make it better. If it gets really sick, you shoot it, kill it, remove it, and you replace it with another one. We think differently about second wave technologies. And as we go to the future, as we go into the third wave, and we start thinking about microservices and containers, it's on a totally different scale. And let me give you an example. And again, we are not Google, you are not Google, but let me give you a Google example. They spoke at our sales conference a year or 2 back. And the guy from Google, he put up a slide and it said, Google start 2 billion containers. 2 billion microservices, 2 billion of these little mini servers. I remember looking at that thinking, gee, that must be like every year or something. And he pressed the button and it said every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, they start 2 billion microservices. You are not Google, I am not Google, I appreciate that. But it gives you a sense of scale. When you start to think, if you're a bank with a mobile banking application, the chances are the way that application connects to your systems at the back end is through a container. So how many people are accessing your mobile banking application at any individual time or at any particular time? It's likely to be thousands. We need to think differently. And the reason and the best way I can stretch this analogy is this is much more like insects. We are becoming the Dr. Doolittles of managing this menagerie of different capabilities and different types of deployment. But don't overanalyze this, but I think it's a nice way of kind of having it more visually in your mind as to what things kind of look like. So it's all these things that we feel have kind of led to this need for companies to really think about data fabrics and what a data fabric could be, what a data fabric could look like for you. And from a NetApp point of view, we're aligning our business along with these new transitions, these new imperatives. And I think the first one is the cloud is amazing, right? The cloud can enable you to do some incredible things with speed, with agility, access to a marketplace full of applications that are just there and available on demand. But there's more that you could do. There are a lot of things that still don't exist in the cloud, or certainly not consistently, or maybe not as well as they could. Enterprise grade data services is still in its infancy in the cloud. Being able to do protection, encryption, security, compliance. Our view was the cloud is great, but there's a lot more we could do. And how could we take more of our technologies into the cloud to give that extra set of capabilities to you? Second thing is, how do you embrace the best of both worlds? You are going to have wave 1, wave 2, and wave 3 technologies, and sometimes you're going to want to combine these as well. How can I combine, an application I'm running that's a kind of a wave 1 application with capabilities of the cloud? How do I create hybrid deployments? And also then, how do you continuously optimize for the future? In a cloud world where people are literally, developers and application owners are just bringing applications online as and when they need them, how do you understand what they're doing, when they're doing it, how things are growing? Are they optimized? Are they efficient? Are they, so these 3 areas have been the kind of the big ones that we've taken a focus from. And these 3 areas really kind of are what we think underpin the capabilities of having a data fabric. And so a data fabric, really, the simple definition is a beautifully connected single experience of systems, software, and services. And we think that there's 3 things that it can really help with as companies think about IT for the future. The first one is freedom of choice. We don't know what the next 12, 18, 24, 36 months looks like. We used to. We used to invest in technology and plan that technology would last us for the next 3, 4, or 5 years. When we think about the impact of cloud, how do you know? And I've had companies that I talk to who say to me, we need to do something now. And cloud isn't part of it, but we're fairly sure the business is going to tell us that we have to think about the cloud in 12, 18, 24 months. And the last thing I want to do is to spend $1 million or whatever it was, euros on technology to then be told that Azure is a part of our future plans and have to go back to them and say, I'm sorry, I didn't really consider that. I need more money. So having that ability to make technology investments with that understanding that it's giving you the freedom of choice to do what you need to do when you need to do it in the future, I think is very important part of data fabric. Simplicity. We've spent the last 10 to 15 years trying to break down silos of technology, silos that had built up as we designed infrastructure for applications. They were inefficient. They were high cost. There was so many reasons why there were good reasons why we did it, and so many bad things that left us with. There is, if you think about it, going forward, so much choice. Do you build it yourself? Converged, hyper-converged, object, software-defined, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, software as a service with Salesforce, SAP. Are we getting to a point now where, because we have so much choice, that we're in danger of building up a new generation of silos with all the problems that the last ones had, but just a different type? And then finally, how do you protect? If you're going to start to disperse data and applications across not just multiple locations, but multiple clouds, what data is where? Is it secure? Is it encrypted? Is it compliant? So there's a bigger need for us to understand what we're putting where, and ensuring that it is protected, encrypted, and it's not exposing us to some sort of compliance or regulatory breach. So again, if you've got any questions as we're going through this, please feel free to stick them on the chat, and I will definitely get to them as we go through the last few pieces of this. So what does it look like? All of what I've talked about is very ethereal, very kind of high level, very kind of all these things are happening. Well, let's look at it through the lens of workloads. Most companies I talk to, it tends to get down to, we want freedom of choice, simplicity, protection. Those are tenets of what it is that we want to achieve. But the reality is we've got a workload that we need to focus on. So we very much kind of look across from a workload perspective. These are not exclusive. This isn't the only 7. It's just the 7 that tend to come up most frequently that most companies are looking at. File-based data continues to be the lion's share of data that companies are trying to manage and deal with. Virtual desktop was growing before the crisis and has accelerated because of the crisis. Enterprise applications, SAP moving to SAP HANA by 2027, Oracle 11 going end of patch release in December. 40% of companies using SQL Server are still using a version that is 2008 or previous, which is completely end of support and end of life. So there are major enterprise application projects happening. Kubernetes and containers. Most companies are really starting to look at this as to what potential could it offer them for the future. The rise of private clouds, as I mentioned before, to take on more of the kind of the wave 1 workloads. IoT and edge to some degrees, as companies are thinking about how do we gather more data from edge devices from remote locations and kind of bring that back in to do some of the things like advanced artificial intelligence and analytics. So what's our approach been? We start off with the endpoints. I could call them storage devices, but I'm going to call them endpoints because I don't necessarily mean a storage device. The bottom left-hand side of this picture, for those of you who know NetApp, I'm sure is nothing new to you. We will continue to deliver, all-flash arrays, our E-series array, which is very, very high performance, very low latency. Our HCI platform, which is great for private clouds, our object platform to help people deal with these massive growing quantities of data at a potentially lower cost. But we also have taken our technology, the core operating system, which is where all of our value is, that runs on our all-flash FAS storage array. We have taken that into Amazon, Microsoft, and Azure. And we started that process about 5 years ago, which means that we're operating in about 300 regions so far. We do it 2 ways. One is you can run a virtual version of our storage device in any of the clouds. Let's think of that as infrastructure as a service. 2, we are now a first-party service inside Azure called Azure NetApp Files. Go to the console, storage, Azure NetApp Files, it's there. It is managed, supported, delivered, and built by Microsoft. We're also a first-party service inside Google Cloud. Go to the console, you'll find it there. That is just volume as a service or platform as a service. It is a volume that delivers efficiency, performance, protection, encryption, tiering, all of those kind of capabilities in a consistent fashion across any cloud. So what does that mean? If I pick on enterprise applications, let's say that that's your focus. Let's say you're looking at moving to SAP HANA. The first 2 questions I need to ask is, okay, looking at that application, I've got to understand the characteristics. The second question is, how do you want to run it? And that's why we have these technologies. If you say to me, we're looking at SAP HANA, we're going to be on premises, then you know what? Our all-flash FAS is probably a really good platform. By the way, we can put another one in your disaster recovery facility and you're set to go. But what if you wanted to do a hybrid model? Well, maybe our all-flash FAS on premises combined with Azure NetApp Files running inside Azure, which is a certified SAP Microsoft solution, and connecting those together, now you've got a hybrid model. What if you want to go completely into the cloud? Well, our Azure NetApp Files is a certified solution for SAP. You can run SAP HANA natively straight inside Azure. It goes back to that freedom of choice. What we have is endpoints that can deliver on the characteristics of the workload you're looking at in however you want to run it. If you want it to be on premises today, hybrid tomorrow, and cloud native in the future, or start any place on that journey, that's what we're focused on. And over the top of this, what we've also been building out is a set of what we call very rich sort of data services. And if you think back, I talked about insights, I talked about that ability to understand what you've got. Our Cloud Insights capability allows us to discover any infrastructure you're running on premises from any vendor. It also allows us to discover any resources you're consuming in Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. We can present a single consistent view as to exactly what resources you're using or consuming, regardless of where they are. You can even group those together such that they represent a department or an application. You could do chargeback or buyback, whatever you wanted to do, you have that visibility. We'll make recommendations as to how you could optimize it. If we see a volume that's got 500 terabytes of data and you haven't accessed 200 or 300 terabytes for 6 months, we will tell you proactively and say, why don't you tier that? And because we have a capability called Fabric Pool, we can then tier that data onto a lower cost storage media. We can integrate and connect. We can discover any of these volumes that exist in any location and simply drag and drop them together to connect on-premises volumes to the cloud, or to be able to connect volumes across clouds. Maybe you've got 100 remote locations and you need that data back to the core, either to protect it or to get it in front of the teams who are doing analytics or artificial intelligence. We can simply drag and drop, and that data is now coming back to the core to get it in front of those teams. We can adapt. In the cloud, we can shape our volumes. A volume costs the level of performance you want and the capacity that you need. That's what you're paying for inside the cloud. But the performance is really dependent on the characteristics of the workload. If you're running virtual desktop, your workload peaks morning, lunchtime, afternoon. So why would you have a volume inside the cloud that is set for peak demand 24 hours a day? What if you could shape the characteristics such that the volume you're using and you're paying for is actually tracking the usage of the application? When you need more, you pay for more. When you need less, you pay for less. And now we can do that with compute as well. With Spot, which is a recent acquisition that we made, when you bring an application online in the cloud, using Spot, we can allocate the lowest cost compute resources available at that particular time to support that application, and then monitor that over the life cycle of that application. And finally, from a protection perspective, yes, we can do data protection, application protection, encryption, regardless of where the data and applications live, but we can also do compliance. So let me go back to my enterprise application example. If you want for a hybrid model, you've got an all-flash FAS on premises, you're running Azure NetApp Files inside Microsoft, connected together, because we can do that very, very easily. That's your hybrid model. But what if we could proactively look inside the database schemas inside the cloud, SAP, SAP HANA, Oracle, SQL, and tell you whether there was any data that you've just replicated across that could expose you to any form of regulatory or compliance breach. And it's these capabilities that are the ones that people are most usually least aware of in terms of when they think about NetApp. But it's these capabilities, it's picking what are the right combinations of these capabilities that we need to address whatever workload it is that you want to address. That is where we start thinking that we can bring a data fabric to life for you. And you can bring other people into the data fabric, whether it's Veeam or Commvault or Comprise or Full Sail or whoever it might be. With a data fabric construct, it becomes very easy to layer those other capabilities on top. And of course, you've got to think about how you manage it. We have our own management tools to allow us to do certain parts of this. Our cloud manager will discover volumes, connect volumes, run compliance. But chances are, if you're an enterprise organization, you've got a service now, you've got a higher level orchestration and automation framework, in which case everything I've talked about can be managed through REST APIs or a complete set of Ansible modules that we've been building. So I'll touch back on Spot very quickly. 3 aspects of it. People are taking enterprise applications to the cloud and quite frequently don't make a commitment as to a period of time it's going to run for. They consume on-demand resources, which are the most expensive resources you can possibly use inside the cloud. With our Spot Ocean, we can make sure that for any enterprise applications that you run, that it is using the most efficient, the lowest cost resources to support that application. And we will keep bringing in and phasing out compute resources for the lifecycle of that application to make sure that it is as efficient as it possibly can be. For cloud native applications, if you bring on a new application inside the cloud, a container, whatever it might be, you can call Spot, and we will also align the lowest possible cost compute resources to that application. And for user desktops, we bought a company called Cloud Jumper that gives us an incredibly simple way of automating the creation and deletion of virtual desktops across Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And because we have that automation, when somebody requests a desktop, we can automatically bring that desktop online. We will call Spot, and we will align the lowest cost compute resources for the lifecycle of that desktop. And underneath that, we will bring significant volume efficiencies to any one of these workloads. On average, companies that are using Spot and using our cloud volumes are seeing anywhere between 70 and 90% cost savings in the cloud. It's that significant, it's that much of an opportunity. So I want to leave you with just 2 things. The first was a company that I've loved working with for the last couple of years called 3Lateral. I met Vladimir Mastilovic, who's the CEO for 3Lateral, a couple of years ago now, and he was telling me about his challenges. They bring artificial humans to life. They have a rig they call the Sunflower. It has 100 high definition video cameras with strobe lights fitted. You go inside the Sunflower and they capture your face in all of the different dimensions on different lighting spectrums, so they can pick up the pores, the muscle definition, veins, arteries, everything within inside your face and your skin. They're doing this because they want to create more realistic avatars for gaming, for entertainment, but they're also looking at it for medical. What if you could be scanned to that level of detail? Then you go back 2, 3, 4, 5 months later, you're scanned again, and a comparison. What could be detected by that comparison? You know, is there a sign of cancer, or maybe a liver disease because your skin has slightly changed color, or your eyes have slightly changed color? Their Sunflower gathers data at 70 gigabytes per second, which is 1 petabyte of data every single scan that they do. That was their first challenge. That's bread and butter to us. Second challenge was, how do we reduce the cost of doing that? That's fine, we can tier data to the cloud. That was the second challenge. They're looking to turn this into a commercial capability they can sell to other companies. Therefore, their software development process has to be bulletproof. And that was a third challenge we could help them with, using our HCI. And now they just got bought by Epic Games, and they're being asked to share this data with Epic Games locations all across North America. This was a CEO level problem. And he came to us, and I said, what you need is a data fabric. We solved the performance, the capacity problem immediately. We're now working with them to help them modernize their software development pipelines. And we're working with them inside AWS to provide our technology in AWS so that they can make that data securely available in an efficient manner to any of the developers, the artists, or the people who need to have access to it. So I finished with a completely shameless plug. And there's an expression that goes, he knows a little bit about it, he wrote the book on it. I actually did write the book on it. This idea of these kind of 3 waves of technologies is something that's fascinated me. And to celebrate my 15-year anniversary with NetApp, I decided to write a book. It's called The Third Wave. It's on my website here. It is a free download, probably only a 45, 50-minute read. If you've been interested in anything I've had to say and would like to know a little bit more, please feel free to go and download it. Like I say, it's a free download. I do hope you enjoy it. So I'll leave you with this final thought. I know I've overwhelmed a lot of you with a lot of information. I hope it's been useful. I hope it's given you maybe some food for thought. I hope that maybe it's given you a reason to come and talk to us. But most importantly, what I'd like to leave you thinking is, what is it that we could do to help you build your data fabric? What would your data fabric do, and what could it enable you and your company to do for the future? So thank you very much for your time. I noticed that we don't have any questions at the moment, so I will say I've been Matt Wats, CTE for NetApp. Thank you very much indeed.
Welkom terug. Bij deze bedanken we Matt Wats voor zijn interessante presentatie. Ik hoop dat je er iets van hebt opgestoken. Zoals jullie weten geven we wekelijks een letter vrij om uiteindelijk een 12-letterig woord mee te kunnen maken. De vierde letter die we vrijgeven is de letter O. Volgende week staat in het teken van Rapid7 met hun SIEM-oplossing. De centrale vraag tijdens deze sessie is hoe zij vroegtijdig security-incidenten kunnen signaleren en de impact daarvan maximaal beperken. Tot snel!